우리가 계속 산 따라다니면서 그래서 디지털 좀 디톡스를 해보면 어떨까 싶어가지고 몸 쓰신 거 액티비티 좋아하세요?
뭐 액티비티는 뭐 저기요. 저기요. 아니.
와 근데 여기 자연 풍광이 되게 멋져요. 어디서 많이 본 듯하지 않나요? 너무 이쁘죠?
완전 멋있어.
이 열기가 스팀 사우나의 그 열기가 내 몸을 감싸면서 나의 피로를 확 가져오고
아, 뭐 여기는 뭐 산, 뭐 예, 아래 산, 아래
네.
산, 또 산,
다시 산.
다시 산.
근데 여기는 이름이 이뻐요. 공작산이에요.
공작산?
예, 산세가 약간 공작새 같다고.
아 진짜.
예,
아, 이름 되게
전체적인-
예쁘다.
예, 그리고 이 홍천에서 가장 유명한 사찰이 바로 뒤에 있거든요.
뒤에?
예, 저 뒤쪽에 이제 수타사라고 있거든요. 거기 천년구찰이고 월정산 들어보셨죠? 평창.
네.
월정사의 말사예요. 수타사고 결정적으로 이 계곡이 엄청 유명해요.
그러니까 여기가 지금 계속 저쪽에서 오면서부터 너무 예쁜 거예요. 아 이런 데서는 아이들이 놀기도 또 엄청 좋을 것 같아요.
그리고 이 계곡이 안 깊어요, 그렇게.
그러니까요.
네, 그래서 잔잔하고
지금도 저기 지금 놀고 있잖아요.
네, 애기들
네.
놀고 있고.
안녕하세요.
네, 안녕하세요.
여행 오셨어요? 그럼 어디에서 오신 거예요?
바로
아 집이 양평이신 거예요?
바로 이웃 동네네요. 예.
아 저희 우리 지금 여행 중인데 저희가 핸드폰이 없어가지고 그 폴로이드로만 기록을 남기고 있어요. 저희가 선물로 가족 사진 하나 찍어드릴게요.
예, 지금 너무
아 진짜로.
저희가 지금 디지털 디톡스 해가지고 여기 보세요.
자 하나 둘 셋. 아 귀여워.
감사합니다.
아 진짜 지나가다가 너무 예쁘셔가지고 가족이. 산이 보이고 물이 흐르고
네.
그런데 꼭 저런 식당이 있더라. 야외
그리고
식당.
홍천이 나물로 되게 유명해요.
출출하긴 해요 좀.
네.
한번 가봅시다.
진짜 말 그대로 풍경 맛집이네요.
네. 근데 음식이 없네.
아, 빨리 시켜야겠다.
사장님, 아우 사장님 오시네. 아 안녕하십니까 사장님.
아유, 반갑습니다.
반갑습니다.
아이,
반갑습니다. 네.
여긴 너무 좋아요.
네.
음식만 맛있으면 됩니다 이제.
음식도 맛있을 거예요. 저희가 한 40여 년
40여 년이요?
예.
여기서? 와. 그러면 여기서 추천한
추천 음식이요.
네.
저희가 가장 잘 나가는 게 홍천산 더덕구이 백반하고
더덕구이.
홍천산 곤드레 비빔밥.
아,
네.
맛있겠다. 아 여기 돌아다니니까 배가 좀 출출해요.
네.
찌개부터 가겠습니다.
뭐 찌개 뭐예요?
이거는 더덕구이에
네.
청국장 찌개가 나와요.
찌개.
더덕구이입니다. 홍천산 더덕구이.
너무 먹음직스럽게 보인다.
반찬은 기본으로 이 정도 나와요. 한 9가지에서 10가지 정도.
여기 사채 나물이네요.
네. 냉이. 그건 나가실 거고. 요거는 곤나물.
곤나물.
네, 봄에 요때만 주로 잡수는 거예요. 요건 뭐 달래 갖다 무친 거 다 아실 거고. 요거는 유채. 요즘 계절에는 유채 순이 하루나라라는데.
하루나?
예, 유채꽃 피는 유채 그 순으로다가 나물.
아 유채. 나
예.
이런 건.
싱싱한 거죠. 요즘 계절에 가장 먼저 나오는 거니까 싱싱한.
그냥 되게 싱싱한 맛이에요.
중요한 거는 뭐 지금 아니면 못 먹는 거잖아요, 그렇죠?
그렇죠.
예, 봄에
조금
유채.
지나면은 이게 억세진다 그럴까?
원래 새순을 먹는
그렇죠,
거니까.
새순.
원래 새순을 먹는 거니까.
아, 여기에 곤드레밥이에요?
네, 요게 곤드레밥인데 요거는 잘 비비셔야 맛있거든요.
자 찌개.
아이고, 제가 떠들었는데 또
아유,
이
아유.
형님의 배려
제 팔이 좀
고맙습니다.
길어요.
더덕을 빨리 맛봐야겠는데요, 여기?
아, 그래, 더덕도
네,
먹자.
더덕 먼저 드십시오.
네. 너무 맛있어.
더덕 본연의 향이 딱 나면서 그 양념도 잘 버무리시네요, 입안에서. 이게 약간 뻑뻑할 수도 있고 너무 무를 수도 있는데 딱 적당하게 잘 해주셔가지고.
제가 본 이 더덕은
네.
진짜 여기에서 어딘가에서 캔 거야. 아, 진짜 자연 그대로의 맛이야. 이 살이 얘도 밀도가 좋아.
네.
와, 이 냄새가
딱 먹어야죠.
아, 이 향이 좋다. 보통 우리가 왜 곤드레밥 하면 이렇게 비비는 게 아니고 이미 밥을 지어서
네.
이 곤드레 색깔이
네.
갈색 비슷하게 짙은으로. 근데 이거는 곤드레인데 살아있어, 색깔이.
진짜 딱 본연의 맛, 본연의 색, 본연의 향.
향 그대로. 훨씬 더 맛있는 것 같아요, 저는. 약간 심심한 듯한데
하지만 입안을 꽉 채우는
네.
향이.
이거 어떡하지? 다시 도덕을 하나. 와, 이거 진짜 맛있다. 와, 진짜 맛있어.
예언하신 게 맞아 떨어졌어요. 풍경 맛집.
네, 풍경 맛집. 와, 대박.
지금이 디지털 디톡스가 제일 힘들어요, 저는. 이 음식만 보면 찍고 싶으니.
아, 그렇지. 아니, 그래서 저한테 이거 주셨잖아요.
와, 근데 이걸로 찍는 것도.
항상 찍으면 되지.
아, 진짜 추억이 되겠다. 잘 나올까요?
줄 잡으세요.
네.
하나, 둘, 셋.
각도도 감에 그냥 맡기는.
아, 감이 막히는 거죠. 우리가 이제 산을 벗어나니까
네.
홍천이 진짜 큰가 봐요. 여기 다 임야지대야.
그렇죠. 이면지대고 정말 면적이 우리나라에서
네.
기초 지자체 중에서 제일 크거든요, 홍천이.
그러니까.
그래서 홍천에 홍자가
네.
크다 홍자.
넓은 홍.
넓은 홍자.
그 여기는 무슨 마을인가요, 그러면?
예, 여기 재미있게 동키 마을이 있어요.
동키?
예, 당나귀. 당나귀
동키가 있어요?
체험 마을이 있습니다.
진짜요?
좀만 가면 돼요.
진짜요?
예. 그래서 이제 뭐 전국에 이런저런 재미있는 이색 마을, 뭐 체험 마을이 있거든요.
네.
그래서 제가 또 찾아보니까 홍천에 워낙 재미있는 마을이 있어가지고
야, 여기
슬슬 한번 걸어가 보시죠.
홍천도 신기하네. 와, 저기 이상한 트랙터 있다.
여기 그 체험 마을에서 나온 것 같은데요?
그런가 보다.
저기. 저기. 대박 딱 만났어요. 안녕하세요. 예.
안녕하세요. 이거
동키 마을. 맞죠?
체험하는 거예요?
아, 이거 동네 한 바퀴 도는 거예요.
네.
동네 한 바퀴?
네.
저희 태워주시면 안 돼요?
네,
타세요?
알죠. 고맙습니다. 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요. 아이고.
네, 안녕하세요. 네, 안녕하세요.
네.
출발!
트랙터 혹시 타보셨어요?
예, 저는 뭐 농촌 체험할 때 타본 적이 있고 어디 뭐 안동 거기서는 물 건너갈 때 탄 적도 있어요. 근데 타보신 적이
저는 어렸을 때
네.
어쨌든 목포에서 자랐고
네.
시골에 자라서 경운기에다가
네.
볏짚을 쌓아요.
네.
그러면 운전하시는 동네 아저씨분이 뒤에가 안 보인단 말이에요. 그러면 따라가다가 탁 타! 그럼요. 뒤에.
예.
그래서 쫙쓱 가지.
예.
그러다가 아저씨가
뭐가 있나?
뭐 있나 쳐다보면 그때 살짝 내려.
뭐가 무게감이 느껴지니까.
예. 그런 것도 많이 해봤죠. 많이 타봤죠. 진짜로 방금처럼 시골에서는
네.
가다가 저기야 태워주면 태워주고 그랬어요.
아, 그
초등학교 때.
여기서 이렇게 연식이 또 나오는.
네.
그래서 그다음에 그 하우스 속에는 그 당시 이제 다른 작물을 심게 돼서 자치가 보면은 지금 마음을 줘놓고 차나무를 가려놨죠. 저게 6년분 인삼을 심은 거예요. 한 번 심으면 6년이 딱 됩니다. 그래서 홍천군 5대 명품 중에 하나인 6년분 인삼 맛이다.
홍철이도 인삼인가?
그러니까요. 꽤 큰데요?
인삼은
근데 저는 가장 신기한 게,
네.
이 기사님 운전 실력이 커브가 장난 아니야.
베스트 드라이버.
네. 정말 이게 못 갈 것 같은데 확 커브가 최고예요. 이런데.
꺾으시나?
야, 요런데.
야, 이거는 차도 힘든데.
그러니까요.
와.
또 물도 흐르고. 동키마을이네요.
아니 동키 마을이고 뭐고.
지금
이거 봐. 이거 미어캣 아니에요?
미어캣인데요?
미어캣이 왜 강아지처럼?
아니 근데 안 도망가나? 안녕.
안녕. 얘 진짜 신기하다.
혹시 안 도망가네?
안 도망가. 안아볼까?
우와.
우와. 야, 너 뭐야? 강아지야?
지금 이 프레임이 너무 웃겨요.
너 강아지야? 너 진짜 웃긴다 너.
뽀뽀도 하겠는데?
얘야 여기 거의 문직인데.
그러니까요. 뭐가 많겠는데요? 뭐 미어캣이 있을 정도면은.
진짜 웃기다.
네.
애들 진짜 좋아하겠다.
또 한번 들어가 보시죠, 뭐.
여기가 그러니까 홍천 마을.
네.
우와.
바로 지금 있네요. 지금.
대박. 아니
당나귀-
동키가 저렇게 커요?
예.
촬영할 때 예전에 사극 영화 찍을 때 동키 되게 조그만했었거든요.
네.
얘들 힘들이 좋아가지고 원래 이제 뭐 달구지나 뭐 이런 거 끄는 애라는데
네, 술에 끌고.
나 저렇게 큰 애는 처음 봤는데?
어서 오세요.
어머.
안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
네.
딱 아예 소개하지 마시고 딱 봐도 여기 사장님.
사장님 포스가 보이죠?
사장님 보스 같다.
그러니까 어깨도 힘 줘줄지.
아니 이건
지금
네.
좀 당나귀 농장에 오셨으니까
네.
당나귀들 먹이도 좀 주고 좀 소개 좀 하려고 그래서 제가 준비하고 있었습니다.
아무리 그래도 사장님이어도 아래쪽 내려오세요.
네네네.
뭐 이렇게 에스코트 해드릴게요.
네, 궁금한 게
네.
요 앞에
네.
미어캣이 있더라고.
네, 네,
얘는 문직이에요?
네. 사람한테 잘 따르고 그러는 애가 짱구.
아까
그 저한테 뽀뽀했어요.
걔가 여잔데.
미남을 알아봤네.
미남을 알아보는구나. 걔가 좀 밝혀요. 이렇게 잘생겼다.
얘네들은 살이 쪘다. 토끼죠?
네, 토끼예요.
네. 얘 하나 줄까 봐.
왜 뺏어 먹어? 여기 딱 지켜버리네. 지키네.
여기 새도 있어.
얘네는 이제 앵무새.
새들도
앵무새?
새들도
인코 앵무새.
엄청 사람 손을.
네네네.
네.
이렇게 사람들을 좋아해서 이렇게 입을 오물오물하죠.
네.
벌써?
도르찌개는 그렇죠.
이렇게 하나씩.
네네. 초식 동물이라서 입술로 먹이를 먼저 잡아요.
아, 그러네요.
왜 육식 동물은 이빨을 먼저 이렇게 드러내잖아요. 근데 초식 동물들은 입술로 보세요. 입술로 잡죠. 네네. 이렇게 여기 얘도 다 큰 아이거든요.
아 근데 저는 이렇게
큰 아이들.
큰 아이들 처음 봤어요.
아 그러셨구나.
보통 다 요만한.
아.
그리고 얘는 좀 말처럼 생겼는데
네. 당나귀하고 말하고 교미를 해서 난 그 버새.
종류가 되게 많구나.
예, 그렇죠.
그럼 이 친구들이
말씀을 나누는 사이에 저희가 너무 애간장을 누리고 있어요.
야 진짜 너도 하나 먹자.
하나씩 먹어.
아유, 이름들이 다 있죠.
네네네.
아,
얘는 느림이,
느림이,
얘는 바비,
바비,
그 옆엔 하늘이,
하늘이,
쟤는 이순이,
이순이.
얘는 콩콩이.
다 보시기만 하시도 아시네요.
아 그럼요.
영광새가 나네요.
기분 나빴어요.
아 기분 미안해.
고개 숙여버리네.
여기 새가 있어서 더 높이는 못 들거든.
오!
얘네들은 귀로 그러니까 자기네 그 속마음을 얘기를 하거든요.
네.
그래서 이제 이렇게 귀가 왔다 갔다 하죠 앞뒤로. 그러면은 나 지금 불편해 마음이. 근데 이렇게 이제 뒤로 제끼면서 쳐다볼 때에는 이제 기분 좋을 때.
장난쳐가지고 기분 나빠지고.
앞뒤로 가잖아요. 저게 기분 안 좋아.
알았어, 내가 풀어줄게.
기분 안 좋아, 기분 안 좋아.
제가 풀어줬어요. 네.
아, 기분 안 좋아. 그게 해가지고. 근데 사실 이런 데 오면
네.
항상 아이들 사주고 아이들이 먹여주는데
그렇죠.
제가 이렇게 하니까 내가 애가 된 것 같아요. 약간 동심으로 돌아간 거.
지금 얼굴이 가장 밝으신 것 같아요.
오늘 제일 맞죠?
네. 저도 동물을 워낙 좋아해가지고.
그러니까.
너무 참.
여기 있다.
동물들이 알아봐요. 동물들 좋아하는 분들은.
그러니까. 그럼 여기를 어떻게 하다가 이렇게 큰 농장을 할 생각?
저희 애기 아빠가 이제 한우를 한 100도 했었는데.
한우?
응, 구제역이 있었잖아, 2011년도에.
아.
그래서 이제 구제역을 크게 이제 타격을 입고 승마는 이제 체험을 하고 이럴 적에 위험도가 높겠다 싶어서 따로 알아보다가 이제 우연히 당나귀를 알게 돼가지고. 그래서 또 추진할 적엔 저희 애기 아빠가 앞뒤 안 가리고 추진하다 보니까 바로 이거 데려오는 중국에다가 의뢰를 해가지고.
한 방에 딱.
한 방에 딱. 그렇게 해서 한 30도 들어와서 이제 처음에는 많은 이제 우여곡절이 있었지만 이제 10년 동안 하다 보니까 이제 그래도 이렇게 입소문이 나서 이게
가족이 오면 너무 좋겠어요.
이제 좀 아이들이 어린아이들 가족들은
그러니까.
이제 동물들하고 교감을 나누면은 이제 아이들이 성격이 많이 이렇게 좀
그럼요.
정서적으로 안정되지만 사회성도 많이 길러지거든요.
아니 저기 보면
네.
지금 가족분들 다
네.
놀고 있거든요. 너무 좋아.
우와!
아이고.
네, 아이고. 요게 이제
요건 또 뭐예요?
요거는 이제 목베개.
목베개? 그 얘는 뭔데요 그러면?
저쪽 끝에 있는 거는 이제 저희가 토종 메밀. 그래서 이제 저렇게 알이 좀 작아요.
메밀.
껍데기를 까면 이렇게 하얀 통살이 나와요. 네네. 그러고 깐 껍질은 얘가 이제 껍질. 그래서 이제 메밀을 통으로 두면 거기 수분이 있기 때문에 벽에로 살면서 이제 그 잡곡이 부패할 수 있으니까 이렇게 껍데기로만.
이거 베개에 넣으면 뭔가 이렇게 사각사각거리면서 엄청 부들부들하겠다. 이 느낌 되게 좋아.
차가운 기운 때문에 우리 몸에 열이 많은 뇌를 시원하게 하라 그러잖아요.
원래
그렇죠.
머리는 시원하게
시원하게. 예, 그래서 요거를 이제 베면 이제 그렇게 건강에 열 많은 분들한텐 그 건강에 좋고 이제 그 숙면도 할 수 있고.
얘 뭔데 향이 엄청 좋아요.
얘는 이제
향 맡아보세요.
그 라벤더 꽃을 말린 건데 얘네 라벤더는 우리가 그 정서적으로 안정을 주는 향기가. 그래서 이제 차가운 기운과 향기로 이제 베개를 비고 자면 이제 심리적 안정과 차가운 기운으로 이제 머리도 이제 시원하고 해서.
이렇게
그래서 예,
섞으면
그렇게
되네요.
툭툭툭툭 이제 흔들어주면서 네네네네 자연적으로 떨어지고 올라가고 하게 네네 그런 식으로 한.
벌써 좋은 향이 나요.
그리고 벼실 적에는 너무 이렇게 높은 거라든가 무거운 거라든가 이런 거 위에 올려놓으면 빨리 부서질 수 있으니까 얘네들
가루니까, 껍질이니까.
네네네네.
근데 강원도는 메밀이 왜 유명한 거예요?
척박한 땅에서 잘 자라는 식물이다 보니까 강원도는 산간 지역이 많고 비탈진 땅들이 많고 그러다 보니까 이제 그런 데다가 이제 잡곡으로 이제 이용하려고 하다 보니까 이제 메밀을 많이 심었어요. 쌀 대용 이런 쪽으로도 많이 이용하고 그러다 보니까 산간 지역에서 잘 자라는 게 이제 메밀이다 보니까 많이 심었어요. 네.
오,
좋습니다. 네.
예쁘게 됐어. 여기다가 이렇게 딱 차. 자, 촬영할 때도 이동하는 순간에 이렇게. 향이 너무 좋아요.
향이 좋죠.
직접 베개를 만든 거는 처음인 것 같아요.
처음이신
생애
거죠.
처음이에요.
요거 베개 베시고 10분 잠 수면하세요.
Korea, a globally recognized sports powerhouse. Behind the dazzling achievements, there's always an invisible force at work. With sophisticated materials, cutting-edge equipment, and innovative technological solutions, SMEs in the K-sports industry play a vital role in bolstering Korea's status as a sports powerhouse. By integrating AI technology, they unlock athletes' potential and enhance performance, elevating the sports environment to the next level and opening new markets in the sports industry. Their innovative technology and bold challenges drive the growth of Korea's sports industry, creating a better world through sports. The innovation of these SMEs never stops. A systematic partnership support program is implemented to discover promising sports SMEs, provide technical validation and R&D support to enhance competitiveness, and strengthen the foundation for overseas expansion. At Tokyo Sportec 2025, the technological prowess of Korean companies was recognized. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and the Korea Sports Promotion Foundation supported K-Sports companies with product promotion and business consultations with global buyers, demonstrating product quality and market potential, and confirming the possibility of expanding into the global market.
저희는 ICT 강국으로서 그 바이어나 사용자들한테 신기술을 접목한 생활 스포츠 기회를 실질적으로 확대할 수 있는 그 기회를 제공하는데 많은 도움이 될 수 있으리라고 확신을 합니다.
이제 스포츠도 K죠. K 스포츠는 이겁니다.
The joy for all, created by the power of K-Sports. Experience the future of the new sports industry through the innovation and technology of the Korean sports industry.
조용한 바람 그대 생각하나 내게 물어옵니다. 그렇게 그댄
held its first debate over the weekend.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the latest UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
Hello and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. Starting today, President Lee Jae-myung begins work at the Blue House, or Cheong Wa Dae, after the presidential office officially moved back to its traditional home. A phoenix flag symbolizing the country's head of state was raised at the Blue House at midnight. North Korea announced that it tests fired long-range strategic missiles. The regime's leader, Kim Jong-un, oversaw the test launch and said all efforts would be devoted to the unlimited and sustained development of its nuclear combat force. U.S. President Donald Trump insisted a deal to end the Ukraine war is closer than ever before, after holding talks with Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Florida. Zelenskyy also said they agreed on most elements of a 20-point peace framework, but they both acknowledged thorny issues remain, including territorial and security arrangements. We begin this morning with President Lee Jae-myung starting work from the presidential office at Cheong Wa Dae today, following the relocation of the office from Yongsan. On the stroke of midnight, the symbolic phoenix flag was raised at Cheong Wa Dae, also known as the Blue House. President Lee will begin the day by meeting aides over tea before visiting the National Crisis Management Center. He will most likely stay at the Yeomingwan building rather than the main office building for close communication with his senior aides and staff. The Blue House was previously used as the presidential office by former President Moon Jae-in in 2022. Meanwhile, North Korea has announced that it successfully test-fired long-range strategic cruise missiles on Sunday, and that its leader Kim Jong-un oversaw the launch. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency said this morning that the launch demonstrated what it called the absolute reliability and combat readiness of strategic counterattack capability. It added that Kim Jong-un vowed to make all efforts toward the unlimited and sustained development of the regime's nuclear combat force. The South Korean military said it detected the launch of multiple missiles from the Sunan area near Pyongyang at around 8 a.m. on Sunday, noting that the North could conduct additional missile launches. In other news, U.S. President Donald Trump says a peace deal to end the Ukraine war is closer than ever after meeting with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelenskyy in Florida. Zelenskyy also expressed optimism, saying 90% of the 20-point peace plan has been agreed upon. Our Lee Seung-jae has the latest.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelenskyy said they made significant progress toward a potential peace agreement to end the war in Ukraine, following talks held at Trump's Mar-a-Lago residence in Florida on Sunday. Trump said discussions with Zelenskyy and a separate 2-hour phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin brought negotiations very close to a deal, estimating that roughly 90 to 95% of key issues have been addressed.
We had a terrific meeting. We discussed a lot of things. As you know, I had an excellent phone call with President Putin that lasted for over 2 hours. We discussed a lot of points, and I do think we're getting a lot closer, maybe very close.
He emphasized that while major progress has been made over the past month, several thorny issues remain unresolved, including territorial and security arrangements. President Zelenskyy said Ukraine and the U.S. agreed on most elements of a 20-point peace framework, including full agreement on U.S. security guarantees for Ukraine and military provisions. He said broader U.S., European, and Ukrainian security guarantees are close to completion, and a post-war prosperity plan is being finalized.
And we discussed all the aspects of the peace framework, which includes, and we have great achievements, 20-point peace plan, 90% agreed, and U.S.-Ukraine security guarantees, 100% agreed. U.S.-Europe-Ukraine security guarantees, almost agreed. Military dimension, 100% agreed.
Both leaders stressed that security guarantees are essential for lasting peace. The two leaders also held a joint call with European leaders, including representatives from NATO and the European Union, and agreed that negotiating teams will meet in the coming weeks. Trump said he plans to host follow-up talks in Washington in January. He added that discussions with Putin included Russia's role in Ukraine's reconstruction, stating that Russia would help and could supply energy and electricity at low cost. However, he confirmed that Russia has not agreed to a ceasefire, citing Putin's concern about halting fighting and potentially restarting it later. On timing, Trump said a deal could be reached within weeks if talks continue positively, but acknowledged there is also a chance negotiations could fail. Both leaders concluded by reaffirming their commitment to continued negotiations, with Trump saying he remains focused on ending the war. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Today marks 1 year since the December 29th Jeju Air passenger plane disaster, and an official memorial ceremony began this morning at Muan International Airport. The event was jointly hosted by the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport and a group made up of family members of the victims. At 9:03 a.m., memorial sirens rang across Gwangju and South Jeolla Province for 1 minute. The main ceremony began at 10 a.m. with about 1,200 attendees, including bereaved families, senior government officials, lawmakers, and members of the public. Last year's crash occurred when a Jeju Air passenger plane from Bangkok struck a concrete structure during an emergency landing attempt, killing 179 of the 181 people on board. President Lee Jae-myung is expected to kick off diplomacy in the new year with trips to China and Japan. For a closer look back at the administration's diplomacy in 2025 and what to expect in the coming year, we're joined today by Professor Min Jung-un, professor at the Korea National Diplomatic Academy. Professor Min, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning.
So President Lee has vowed to focus on pragmatic diplomacy by putting national interests first since his campaign. What's your overall assessment of the administration's diplomacy this year?
Well, as you know, each of 6 months passed since the Lee Jae-myung government took office. I think that Lee government made two major achievements this year, normalizing South Korean diplomacy and establishing a foundation for national interest-driven pragmatic diplomacy. On the one hand, South Korea suffered from political chaos due to the unconstitutional martial law in December last year, and had to go through the absence of diplomatic leadership for about 6 months. And many things happened during that period of time, including President Donald Trump's inauguration in January, and South Korean diplomacy had a hard time coping with the diplomatic issues and securing its national interests due to the absence of leadership. But thanks to the democratic resilience of South Korea, it could overcome the political chaos peacefully. And President Lee's inauguration changed the situation, and South Korea has restored the diplomatic leadership. For example, President Lee's participation to the G7 summit just 12 days after taking office showed the international community that Korea is back. On the other hand, the Lee Jae-myung government laid the foundation for the pragmatic diplomacy over the past 6 months. Specifically, it successfully addressed key issues between South Korea and U.S., such as tariff negotiations and alliance modernization, and further strengthened the ROK-US alliance. And it also restored the relationship with the key countries like Japan and China. In addition, Lee government also hosted and attended multilateral summits, such as the Korea-ASEAN Summit, the Jeju APEC Summit, and the G20 Summit, and established the foundation for the pragmatic diplomacy centered on national interests to extend beyond the Korean Peninsula and into the Indo-Pacific and the whole world.
Right. A lot of things happened during his first 6 months, and President Lee is expected to visit China early next year. How should South Korea navigate its relations with China in the coming year, and what steps should it take to sort of balance relations between China and the United States in 2026?
Yes. First, as you know, the President Xi Jinping visited South Korea in October to attend the Jeju APEC Summit. And it was President Xi's first visit to South Korea since 2014. And the two leaders of South Korea and China had a bilateral summit on the sidelines of the APEC summit. And it was seen as providing an opportunity to restore the relationship between the two countries. Specifically, the two countries agreed to solidify the foundation for the development of the bilateral relationship by securing political trust between the two governments and simultaneously building trust at the private sector level. In addition, reflecting the structural changes in South Korea and China economic cooperation, they agreed to pursue mutually beneficial cooperation based on a more balanced and reciprocal partnership to produce tangible results in areas that benefits their people. And China also expressed its willingness to cooperate for peaceful coexistence and shared prosperity on the Korean Peninsula. And it also reaffirmed its commitment to fostering a positive atmosphere for dialogue between North Korea and U.S. So South Korea and China are expected to focus on managing and improving bilateral relationships through practical cooperation in the coming years. So there is a shared understanding between the two countries on restoring and developing their relations. So to this end, it is very likely that they will pursue avoiding conflict and friction between the two countries and instead increasing cooperation in practical areas such as economy, culture, and people-to-people exchanges.
I see. And President Lee is also expected to visit Japan pretty soon. How should Korea reassure China and Japan that building a nuclear power submarine with the United States is intended solely to strengthening deterrence against North Korea?
Well, first, as you know, the Lee Jae-myung government also made a sincere effort to improve relations with Japan from the outset, and it laid the foundation for stable bilateral relations between the two countries. As you know, the President Lee visited Japan before his visit to the United States in August, and there he held a summit with Japan and reaffirmed his commitment to restoring shuffle diplomacy and strengthening the trilateral cooperation between South Korea, U.S., and Japan. And in addition, the South Korea-Japan summit also held on the sidelines of the Gyeonggi APEC summit in late October, and it reaffirmed the two countries' commitment to building trust between the two leaders and maintaining and improving bilateral relations. So overall, it seems that South Korea will maintain favorable relationships with Japan and China in the coming years. And South Korea will build nuclear-powered submarines to effectively cope with North Korea's growing military threats. So it will contribute to stably maintaining the security situation in East Asia, which means that there would be no negative impacts on China and Japan. So the South Korea just needed to explain what's going on with the building nuclear-powered submarines to the two countries, and needed to improve cooperation with China and Japan to effectively cope with North Korea's growing military threats.
Right, and with tensions rising between China and Japan, what stance should South Korea take on this issue? And how should it sort of navigate relations with its two neighboring countries?
Well, it is expected that President Lee will visit South and Japan sooner or later. And China and Japan are important partners for South Korea in various ways. And therefore, it is necessary for South Korea to maintain good relations with both countries. So it's not appropriate for South Korea to take one side between the two countries, either just to make the situation worse. Instead, I think South Korea needed to be cautious in making any comments and diplomatic moves about the tensions. And South Korea needed to improve bilateral relationships with both countries respectively, and make a grounded space that the two countries can move to relieve the tensions. And based on the enhanced bilateral relationships, South Korea will be able to offer trilateral meeting with China and Japan in order to deal with the major regional matters like North Korea and trade issues. And South Korea can play a mediating role and provide an opportunity that the two countries will resume the dialogue. And by talking about less or non-sensitive issues like North Korea and trade issues, they will be able to find a diplomatic space where they can resume their bilateral talks. And in return, such a role will enhance South Korea's regional standing and contribute to establishing a favorable balance of power for South Korea in East Asia.
I see. And Professor Min, before I let you go, what should be the #1 diplomatic goal for South Korea in 2026 when it comes to relations with key partners?
Lee Jae-myung government, I think, laid the solid foundation for pragmatic diplomacy in its first year in office. So it is necessary for Lee government to accelerate its effort to implementing the pragmatic diplomacy by strengthening relationships with the major countries like the U.S., Japan, and China in 2026. And to this end, it needed to embody agreements reached between South Korea and the U.S. on trade and security. And it also needed to sustain friendly or amicable relationships by increasing cooperation in practical areas like economy, culture, and people-to-people exchanges with important partners like Japan and China. And furthermore, based on South Korea's strengths in trade, advanced technologies, development cooperation, energy, the defense industry, culture, and people-to-people exchanges, South Korea needed to expand cooperation with the countries in the global south, like Middle East and Africa. So overall, it is expected that 2026 will be an important year when the South Korea will actively pursue the pragmatic diplomacy and make a substantive progress for establishing itself as a global core state.
I see. All right, Professor Min, thank you so much for your insight today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
The music industry has seen a greater presence of artificial intelligence this year, not only as a tool for enhancing music, but even taking center stage itself. Our Ian-jin tells us more.
K-pop duo Deuce made a comeback in Seoul last month, marking the 30th anniversary of the death of member Kim Sung-jae. And after 28 years, a song written and composed by bandmate Lee Hyun-do brought the duo back to their fans, with Kim's voice restored using AI.
Today's Deuce is not about someone in the present. It's about the two members standing together again before you, in the same time, in the same format, on the same screen.
It was an emotional moment, not only for the fans from 30 years ago, but also for younger people who know Deuce from streaming music. And now, thanks to technology, perhaps the duo have returned to stay with fans forever.
It sounded so vivid, as if it were an original recording of his actual voice. My heart was racing, and it felt like the era of new jack swing had returned.
One of the members passed away very early, but even so, the fact that the group can keep going feels kind of amazing.
What's notable is that AI has long been a part of the K-pop industry, where virtual AI artists and idols already exist.
나는 AI가 아니라 나이비스야. 나이비스.
The same goes for the global pop market. In just the past few months, at least 6 AI or AI-assisted artists have debuted on various Billboard rankings. In November, the country song Walk My Walk by Breaking Rust, created using AI, topped the U.S. Billboard country chart. Then, when another song, Don't Tread on Me by virtual singer Kane Walker, climbed to 3rd place on the same chart, concerns arose both within and outside the industry. Results of a consumer survey offer at least some guidance on how the industry is grappling with the AI era. Opinions were evenly split on whether people wanted to reject AI-generated music itself. But as many as 80% said they wanted clear and transparent disclosure when a song is created by AI.
If music is made or sung by AI, it needs to be transparently disclosed in advance. And if many such works are released, it may even be necessary to establish separate charts dedicated exclusively to AI.
Having moved beyond a supporting role to open up a new horizon in the music market as a star itself, AI is bringing endless amazement, not to mention a chilling sense of unease for some. And as this happens, industry rules and guidelines are increasingly in need of new definitions. 이은진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. We start in Suriname, where a brutal knife attack has killed 9 people dead, including 5 children. Police officials say a 43-year-old suspect targeted his own children and neighbors who tried to intervene. The attack on the outskirts of the capital, Paramaribo, on Sunday reportedly followed a phone argument with the suspect's estranged wife after she refused to pick up the children. Authorities arrested the suspect after he attempted to attack responding officers. He remains under hospital care for injuries sustained during the arrest. While Suriname traditionally has low crime rates, the national homicide rate saw a sharp spike to 30 per 100,000 residents in 2024, according to Insight Crime. In the United States, a mid-air collision between 2 helicopters over New Jersey has killed 1 pilot and left another in critical condition. The Federal Aviation Administration reports that an Enstrom F-28A and an Enstrom 280C collided over Hamilton Municipal Airport and crashed at approximately 11:25 on Sunday morning. The pilots were the only people on board each helicopter. Local authorities and the National Transportation Safety Board are now investigating, focusing on whether the pilots were able to see and avoid each other. Weather officials said visibility was good at the time of the crash. Thailand and Cambodia have signed a new ceasefire agreement seeking to end weeks of border fighting that killed more than 100 people and displaced over 500,000 people. The deal was signed on Saturday and confirmed Sunday as top diplomats from both countries met in China for follow-up talks. The agreement includes a 72-hour observation period, after which Thailand has agreed to repatriate 18 captured Cambodian soldiers. French cinema legend and animal rights activist Brigitte Bardot died Sunday at her home in southern France at the age of 91. A representative of the Brigitte Bardot Foundation confirmed her death and said no cause was given, but that she had been hospitalized last month. Bardot rose to global fame in the 1950s and 60s, becoming a symbol of French cinema and cultural change before retiring from film in 1973. She later devoted her life to animal protection, campaigning worldwide against animal cruelty. President Emmanuel Macron paid tribute to the late star, calling her an exceptional woman and a legend of French culture.
After a freezing Friday, the winter weather was much more bearable over the weekend. And there should be no major cold today. In fact, it's going to feel too warm to be the end of December, before things get too cold again at the end of the week. However, air quality will get worsened today as additional fine dust flows in from overseas. The capital area and Chungcheongdo provinces could see very bad levels this afternoon. So despite sunnier skies and warmer highs, a face mask is a must if you're heading out. There was a scattered winter mix this morning in the capital and Gangwon-do province. It should gradually let up as the day goes on, but Gangwon-do province could see 1 to 7 centimeters of snowfall. And this afternoon, Seoul will be getting up to 8 degrees Celsius. Daegu, Gwangju both topping out at 13 degrees. Now, the final week of 2025, we're expecting a similar weather pattern to last week, with an intense chill expected on the final day of the year and on New Year's Day.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.
heritage will unite. We share brilliant values and honor the world's most cherished legacies to pass our heritage on to future generations. Busan invites you. The 48th session of UNESCO World Heritage Committee, July 2026, Busan, Korea.
We're here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new style, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Monday, December 29th here in Seoul. I'm Lee Soo-jin, and this is News Generation. Joining us today is Haeyoung.
Happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday, and also Christopher's with us.
Hi, great to be with you.
And both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. So it's Monday, the start of a brand new work week, but this week is a little different. It's the final week of 2025. And as the year comes to a close, we're reflecting on key areas of our society and how they've impacted the lives of young people over the past year. And today we begin with none other than the economy. So in Korea, the end of the year is also tax season, a time to settle accounts and reflect on income and spending. So as 2025 comes to a close, how did the economy impact young people this year?
Well, first of all, I'm a freelancer, so I don't actually start working on year-end tax settlement as I wrap up a year. I do it in May instead. But even without that formal process, around this time every year, I naturally reflect on how I did financially compared to last year. And I think about how much my income grew, whether I managed my spending more wisely, and how much I was able to save. And people often say these days, oh, everything goes up except my salaries. But I was fortunate to work more this year, and that did translate into higher earnings, and I'm grateful for that. But at the same time, living cost rose significantly and prices went up, and as my child started more after-school activities, expenses increased as well. So to be honest, even though I earned more a little bit, my savings didn't grow as much as I had hoped, and I think that really reflects how many young people these days felt about the economy this year, working harder, earning a bit more, but still feeling financial pressure because costs keep rising faster and faster.
And at the same time, I feel like as you get older, there's so many places where you can spend your money on.
Right.
So that's true. So what about you? Is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's a really important point about the rising costs that young people are facing. I wanted to highlight a bit of a different angle here. So I noticed that for many people in my age group, one of the biggest challenges in 2025 has been the so-called labor market duality. So on paper, we have these statistics to say, youth unemployment is pretty low. We have, the economy grew this year, but there are increasing numbers of young people who are in this category called resting. So they're not looking for work, they're not working, so they've kind of like given up on finding a job. So in the last 20 years, the number of people who are in their 20s in Korea has actually decreased by 17%, but the number of resting people in their 20s has grown by over 60%. So that indicates that the share of people who have given up on finding a job has increased significantly. So from what I see, I don't think it's necessarily that people don't want to work. It's that people are getting more selective and kind of giving up on that process if they can't get that ideal job that they were kind of seeking. So that's one trend that I've kind of observed. I do think that AI is a big thing here. So with a lot of these like entry-level kind of positions, internship kind of things being automated away, those kind of opportunities to have your foot in the door, those opportunities are somewhat decreasing or disappearing. So I think that those AI-induced hurdles are a big thing that young people face and will continue to face in the coming years. So we should keep an eye on that.
So I think what you're describing suggests a disconnect between headline employment numbers and the reality young people face on the ground. So we're going to talk more about this, but first let's take a look at the screen. As the year comes to an end, many people are taking a closer look at their finances, reviewing their spending as they file their year-end taxes. For many young people, that reflection hasn't been easy this year. Rising prices and housing costs have put growing pressure on their wallets. And as financial anxiety has increased, so has interest in different forms of investment among young people here in Korea. Today on News Generation, we examine the financial realities that young people faced in 2025 in Korea and around the world, from changing investment habits to widening wealth gaps. So as we just saw in a video, for many young people, simply saving money has become harder than ever with rising living costs and housing prices. In fact, recent data shows a growing gap between younger households and the overall population, a sign that asset polarization is deepening. So Cheong, what do the latest figures tell us about young people's financial situation right here in Korea?
Let's all take a look at the screen first. According to the Korean Statistical Information Service, or KOSIS, the average monthly surplus for household has under the age of 39 fell by about 2.7% in the third quarter of this year compared to the same period last year. And what's striking is the contrast. During the same period, the average surplus for all households actually increased by more than 12%. Here, surplus refers to the amount of money left after subtracting living expenses from household income. So when that surplus shrinks, it means young households have less room to save, invest, or prepare for the future. And at the same time, housing affordability continues to worsen as well. The price-to-income ratio, which compares home prices to annual income, has kept rising, making it increasingly difficult for young people to build assets through home ownership, which has long been one of the most common paths to wealth accumulation here in Korea. So taken all together, while the overall economy may appear to be improving on paper, many young people are finding it harder to accumulate wealth.
So what's striking here is the contrast. So while overall household surpluses are rising, younger households are falling behind. So that raises an important question. So is this widening gap unique to Korea, or are young people elsewhere facing similar pressure? So is this gap between rich and the poor something we're also seeing in the US?
Yeah, so I think this gap is similar in some respects and different in other respects. So the one similarity is in both cases we see a K-shaped divergence. So if you just imagine the letter K, the haves are seeing an upward trajectory while the have-nots are kind of sliding downward. So in the US, this dynamic manifests in terms of like consumption power. So because the US is a consumption-led economy, it is a major concern that the top 10% of earners account for over half of all private spending, and apparently 20% of the top earners account for 2/3 of all private spending. So for young Americans, I think the price of participation, or the cost to enter middle-class life, is increasing. Or it's been skyrocketed by many accounts. And I think home ownership is another aspect of this. So back in the 1990s, the average age of first home ownership would have been 28 years old. Now it's 40.
Wow.
So it shows how the prices have risen in that respect. I do think in Korea the situation is different though. So on paper, income inequality is actually less severe than in America, but there is this net asset gap that's at an all-time high. So the top 20% holds nearly 45%. The top 20% holds nearly 45 times the asset wealth of the bottom 20%. And so that's almost entirely driven by the surge in prices of housing in Seoul. And there was one interesting statistic that said that if the average salary worker were to save every penny that they earn, it would take them 29 years in order to be able to afford a house in Seoul. So that just shows how unaffordable things are. And it's not surprising that many young people feel that this is a futile situation. And if they can't, no matter how hard they work, they can't achieve that same level of security or that same lifestyle that their parents had, then opting out of the process entirely might be an option option for them, at least the way they perceive it. So that's a significant issue.
So I can see how both in Korea and the US, we're seeing the same bigger pattern, rising prices, shrinking purchasing power, and the growing anxiety about the future, especially with the skyrocketing housing prices. And in that environment, owning assets seems to matter more than ever. So with assets becoming increasingly important, how are millennials and Gen Zs changing the way or what they kind of invest in these days?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, for many people in their parents' or grandparents' generation, real estate was a key way to build wealth here in Korea, and home ownership became a symbol of financial stability. But that mindset still exists, but the environment has changed. With fewer 전세 listing here, 전세 is Korea's unique lump sum rental system, and more people pushed into monthly rent. Many young people worry that both housing costs and home prices will just keep rising if they wait. And as a result, we're seeing an increase in first-time home buyers, especially among millennials and Gen Z, even under tighter lending rules. And looking at this year's transaction data, apartments account for nearly 80% of all home sales, and this preference is particularly strong among younger buyers, partly due to growing distrust of villas after 전세 fraud cases. And in fact, people in their 30s now make up the largest group of apartment buyers, showing that for many young investors, securing housing has become the primary focus of asset building.
So kind of what stands out the most here these days in this market is like the anxiety that so many people have about, this
now or never.
Right, the fear of falling behind, because you see people around you that are able to buy these apartments are priced at these crazy numbers. So this could be one thing that's more also evident among the younger generations. So speaking of which, so when it comes to financial investments, especially stocks, so how are millennials and Gen Zs different from the way older generations kind of used to invest?
Yeah, I think in the US case, younger generations kind of perceived investing as this boring chore that the older generations did to marginally improve their situation over the course of decades. But I do think in recent years, both in Korea and in the US, the MZ generation has kind of grown to appreciate the power of investing for growing wealth. And I think post-COVID, we saw like meme coins, meme stocks, and kind of, if I throw my money in here, I might, make it big. And that kind of perception has definitely changed. I think, US, some statistics suggest US Gen Zers start at an average age of 21. That's when they start investing. Apparently that's used to be 35 was the age that the boomer generation started investing. So that interest is definitely there. I think interest in investing is definitely good in general, but I do think that there is a tendency to gravitate towards these highly volatile assets like cryptocurrency or these meme stocks like GameStop or something like that. So I do think that that's a risk to get kind of hooked into that. There was a research from University of Chicago which suggested that people who have low prospects for finding a house or being able to afford a house, those people tend to gravitate towards those volatile stocks. So that's obviously a worrisome trend. On the other hand, I think some people are overly cautious and they might, put all their money in savings. And of course, there's risk with that as a financial decision, given that inflation would be chipping away at your savings. So I think there's probably a healthy middle ground somewhere with, ETFs or index funds. But I do think that this kind of get-rich-quick gambling that some young people have fallen into, not everyone, of course, but there is a trend towards that I've observed. So I think that's a symptom of the broader economic woes that some young people are facing, especially amid the asset kind of disparity here.
Right, I guess they feel that because they don't see any other option. They don't see any other way to buy these, expensive houses.
Right.
So what's striking is that investing has shifted from long-term planning to a response to pressure, and in many cases, the fear of being left behind. So it sounds like investing is no longer just about building wealth, but about trying to bypass a system that feels increasingly out of reach. So we want to know about your investment style in this economic environment as well. So we asked on the Arirang News YouTube channel, what are you currently investing in the most? So here's what the results showed. The largest share of respondents, 42%, said they focus on savings or time deposits, reflecting a cautious approach amid economic uncertainty. The stocks came next at 23%, followed by real estate at 19%. Meanwhile, 11% reported investing in other assets, highlighting a smaller but notable interest in alternative options. So despite the hype around investing, the numbers show a clear preference for low-risk options in an uncertain economy. It really shows how cautious many young people are feeling right now, especially with so much financial uncertainty. So to get an expert's take on this, we're going to talk to a business professor, and that conversation will take place right after the break, so don't go anywhere.
NewsGen wants to to hear from you. Go to YouTube and search out Channel Arirang News. Click Posts and cast your vote in the poll. Make a new type of news with us.
Joining us today is Professor Pang Mingjang, a business professor at Kumo National Institute of Technology. So hello, thank you so much for connecting with us today.
Hello, thank you for having me today.
So is wealth polarization that we talked about throughout the show among young people a global trend and not just happening in Korea?
Yes, these days, wealth polarization among young people is clearly a global trend, not a phenomenon limited to one country. Similar patterns are observed across advanced economies such as the United States, Europe, Japan, and South Korea. One major driver is the sharp rise in housing prices, which has far outpaced income growth. As a result, young people who receive family support or already own assets are in a very different position from those who did not. So at the same time, prolonged high interest rates make it harder for young people without initial capital to use borrowing a pathway to asset accumulation. And in addition, stable middle-class jobs have declined, making early career income more uncertain. These factors together mean that wealth gaps are no longer primarily about individual effort or saving behavior, but about structural differences in starting conditions. So over time, this trend weakens social mobility and reduces the long-term dynamism of the economy.
I see. Professor Park, then how are millennials and Gen Z approaching investing differently compared to the older generations? And in your perspective, what's driving those differences?
Yeah, these days, millennials and Gen Z tend to view investing not as an option, but as a necessity for economic survival. Unlike previous generations, they recognize that traditional savings alone are unlikely to lead to home ownership or meaningful wealth accumulation. As a result, they enter financial markets earlier and are more willing to invest in equities, ETFs, and digital assets and other high-risk instruments. They also rely heavily on mobile platforms, social media, and online communities for financial information rather than traditional financial institutions. So while this behavior is sometimes labeled as speculative, from a business and economic perspective, it can be understood as a rational response to constrained opportunities. However, this shift also carries some risks. Differences in financial literacy and information quality can amplify inequality even within the same generation.
Right, I think that's a very important point about financial literacy and how that is affecting the outcomes for young people. In light of that, I wanted to ask your perspective on what policies, if any, could help give younger people a fair chance despite the growing wealth inequality in your view.
Yeah, effective policy responses should focus less on short-term income support and more on creating structural pathways for asset building. Programs such as matches savings account for young people, tax incentives for long-term investment, and early access to diversified financial products can help reduce initial disadvantages. Equally important is institutionalized financial education that equips young people to manage risk and make informed decisions. Without this, greater market access may simply lead to greater losses. Finally, asset building policies must be complemented by housing stability and fair labor market access. The goal is not only equal outcomes, but more equitable access to opportunities at the starting line, which ultimately supports both social cohesion and sustainable economic growth.
So I hope we do see those changes in the new year. So thank you so much for sharing your insight with us today, Professor.
Thank you.
So we've talked about how widening inequality is playing out globally, how millennials and Gen Zs are investing, what kind of policies could help level the playing field. But beyond the numbers, this growing gap is also showing up in everyday language and culture. So how is economic polarization shaping the way young people talk about money and even about themselves, Hyung?
Well, as the economic slowdown drags on, young people are constantly exposed to news about soaring housing prices. And at the same time, young celebrities buying buildings worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And that contrast has made feelings of relative deprivation much more visible. And what's different today is that instead of keeping just those feelings inside, many young people turn them into humor. New expressions like poverty pain, which is 거지통 in Korean, or commoner pain, or 서민통, have become part of everyday language, a way to laugh through frustration. But honestly, as someone in my 30s, I do feel a bit conflicted about that trend. These words are playful on the surface, but underneath they reflect a sense of distance from certain lifestyles, from certain futures. And that shift in language tells us a lot about how deeply economic polarization is shaping not just spending habits, but how young people see themselves and feels about themselves.
I mean, it's really telling that people are turning to humor and self-mockery to cope with what is going on these days, especially when they feel constantly exposed to extreme wealth online. But here's where things get a bit interesting. So Christopher, when we look at the actual data, are young people actually more worse off than before, or is there a gap between perception and kind of reality?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a bit of a paradox here. So there is a mix. I think the data is a mixed bag. So on paper, relative poverty for young people in Korea dropped from 11.6% in 2012 to 7.6% in 2023. As we talked about previously, youth unemployment is low. The economy did improve this year. It did grow this year, but life satisfaction for young Koreans is among the lowest in the OECD. So there's definitely a mixed match here. And so I think an increasing number of young people, as we talked about, have opted out of looking for work, and increasing numbers are what you would call irregularly employed. So I think the numbers are deceiving in some way. And maybe we could say, the reality in 2025 is that people maybe are not necessarily poor by traditional definitions, but the declining income surplus that we talked about earlier means that people are feeling like they're in this kind of one step forward, two steps back kind of situation. So, you have people's income growing, but this year grew by about 1%, but actual housing costs jumped by nearly 12%. And then you had interest expenses on loans surging by over 23%. So the data might show they're technically earning more, but the cost of living is leaving them behind. So there's clearly these structural economic problems. And of course, the social media aspect, I think that's definitely there. I think focusing on that too much might kind of risk downplaying the real economic concerns that they have. So I think that the social media aspect definitely exacerbates the perceptions they have and makes them feel like they're comparing themselves with their peers and the celebrities. So that's definitely an aspect of it. But there's definitely a real concerns that the young people have now.
Right, so even though the numbers suggest young people are doing better on paper, many still don't feel secure about their future. But 2026 is just around the corner, so let's end on a more forward-looking note. So Seong, as we head into the new year, what kind of economic changes do you hope to see for young people?
First of all, I hope to see greater price stability, especially for everyday essentials like food and basic household items. And also on a personal level, I also hope income rise as a parent. And more broadly, I hope we move toward an economy where effort is more reliably rewarded. A society where working hard offers a real sense of financial security, not constant anxiety among young people.
Do you have anything to add?
Yes, so I think in 2026, I would really hope to see somewhat of an educational realignment. So there needs to be a big shift to address the advent of AI and how that's shaping our world, and how all of these entry-level positions like interns and all those positions, like companies are realizing they don't need to hire these people to do those tasks. So I think we need educational realignment to have priorities reorganized and have people prepared to enter amongst this turbulent conditions with this AI-dominated environment. And I do think there also needs to be more serious efforts into, and people have talked about this constantly, I don't want to act like this is a new idea. Obviously, this is much easier said than done, but I do think there needs to be more efforts to promote regional growth, whether that be promoting investment into regional universities or incentivizing companies to move to other cities like Daejeon or Busan to try to decentralize the opportunities opportunities, because I think the only way to fundamentally, structurally change the economic system to provide more opportunities for young people is to have Seoul not be the main place where everyone's coming to live. So there needs to be a second city, there needs to be opportunity outside of Seoul. So that's what I would say is the long-term kind of gold standard.
So today's discussion shows that for young people, the economy is no longer just about numbers. It's about security and whether the future feels within reach. And as 2025 comes to a close, the question isn't just about how much young people earn, it's whether young people feel they have a fair chance. So the task ahead is creating an economy that rewards that effort with real opportunities for everyone. And that brings us to the end of today's episode of News Generation. With News Gen, we'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Korea time with more stories and discussions. Big thanks to Seong.
Thank you and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and also Christopher.
Happy New Year.
Too. And to our viewers, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you have the best day. We are News Generation.